Missouri Institute of Mental Health. I'm Tom Pansella from MIMH. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for Exploring Trauma Through Expressive Art. I will introduce our two wonderful speakers for you in just a second. Just to describe what you're seeing on the screen here, you'll see in the center where you've got the video window, to the right of that, you're going to see a chat window. That's your opportunity to submit questions or comments to us at any point during the presentation. We'll hold those questions until the end, but please submit them anytime that you want. Also beneath the video window, you're going to see an open caption line. That'll give you an opportunity to follow along. If you need to use that open captioning service, we're happy to provide that. Underneath that, you'll see several links. If you're interested in purchasing CEUs for today's presentation, they're only $15 a person. We'll leave that link active for you during the program and following. We'll also send it to you in an email. Along with the other links that you see there, you'll see a link to popping up the slides in a separate PDF if you want. You can follow along with the slides. Or if you'd like to visit one of our speakers' websites, that's there as well. And we'll let her describe some of that and give herself a nice personal plug as we go on today. So now I'd like to introduce to you Maria Ojos Castro, and she provides professional development workshops and teaches group and individual art classes. She has been a visual arts faculty member at the Center of Creative Arts, which is COCA here in St. Louis, since 2007. As a community arts trainer, she has presented CEU workshops for many educational and cultural institutions, including the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University, the Missouri Mental Health Counselors Association, and the Center for Survivors of Torture and War Trauma. She collaborates with licensed therapists, published authors, and other teaching artists. Ojos Castro received a Master's of Fine Arts from Washington University in St. Louis and studied at Santa Raparata International School of Art in Florence, Italy. And alongside her is Erica Odolini, and she is a licensed professional counselor with a Master of Arts in Teaching and a Master's of Education in Counseling. She's worked as a teacher and counselor in school and community settings throughout the country since 1994. She's Director of Family Services at the Center for Survivors of Torture of War Trauma, coordinating care for the myriad needs of immigrant families. She oversees the Open Door International Mentoring Program for immigrant youth in St. Louis and supervises mentors, interns, and graduate-level students assisting with that program. She is also a clinical therapist in private practice. She trained at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, our parent organization, which is one of the country's nationally renowned CACREP accredited institutions, and she is nationally board certified. And so Maria, Erica, I believe Erica's taken the lead. We'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to your participation, your questions. We're going to talk today about expressive art and how you can use that in your clinical practice. I want to start with some distinctions. There is a difference between art therapy and what we're talking about today, expressive art. Art therapy is a standalone discipline. It's a master's level education. The curriculum has two components. These are artists who have a specialty in a visual art and also understand the theoretical application of working with clients and guiding them through the creative process. What we're talking about today is expressive art. This can be practiced by artists, educators, clinicians and counselors, volunteers, therapists, hospital staff. You'll see several different venues will be discussed today. Art therapy has its distinction. Expressive art therapy has several different types. So the types of expressive arts that we're going to talk about today might include the visual arts, drawing, painting, sculpting, collage, movement or dance, mindfulness, yoga, breathwork, language arts, storytelling, essays, poetry, drama. Sand tray therapy and play therapy also fall under that umbrella, as well as music and drumming.
Today you're going to see examples of how we have used expressive arts. So you can see how I've used it with students to open up conversations and to gain trust. I've also used it with patients as a way for them to express a personal expression and go on a healing journey. Well, you'll also see how art can change the representation of a feeling. And sometimes an experience is beyond words, and art is useful to put that into something tangible. When I work with counselors and therapists, I sometimes use art to soften the experience of trauma, and also to examine a loss or a trauma by creating something physical. So one of the ways I have used art is with the center survivors of trauma. I'll let Erica talk a little bit about what we've done together.
Sure. In our collaborative work, I've had Maria come in as a guest artist with one of our groups. We have an international women's group, we call it the Women's Journey to Wellness. And it's 3 components, and the first one is a journey through art, the healing power of art. This is a socialization group. The women were taught over the course of 8 weeks to paint. Now, many of them had never touched an art supply in their life. It was multicultural. We had several languages being spoken, several interpreters present. As the women progressed in their art skills, they also gained confidence. And we were privileged enough to have, in collaboration with artists such as Maria, an opportunity for the women to show their artwork. So what you're seeing here is their gallery opening, their exhibit. We invited people to come in, talk to the artists, our clients, and also ask about the process. So the women got to be experts and share their art. And they also put some things for sale and donated the proceeds to the non-for-profit that helped us organize this process in the first place. So you can see that the smiles and all of that through the art process, their experience of trauma has softened. It wasn't something they had to talk about, but they could be together with other survivors and do something pleasant like this art process.
And what was really great about this is Erica had told me that originally this group did not want to come to the center. They did not want to go to therapy. They did not want to join a support group. But with saying, oh, come to art class, they were willing to come to art class. And they became a really supportive group and learned some great strategies on and working through their experiences. I've used art with some private students that have come to me to take art classes. And I'm going to show you an example of one student's work who came to me as a homeschooled child. And she was going to be homeschooled for the first time. And her mom contacted me in the summertime and said, I'd like you to do some work with her about once a week. And before the new school year began, she recontacted me and said the mother, was diagnosed with cancer, and could I also do some expressive art with her? And this was a great opportunity to see the power of art. So this is an altered book, and I taught her how to find different words that had meaning to her and circle them and cover up everything else. And then I also had to do a self-portrait, and she was able to work through this process and make a poem. The poem was really about her her strength with her family, where her relationship is with her brother, where her relationship with her family. And Erica will talk a little bit later about the importance of someone that might be going through a stressful or traumatic experience, and the supports that surround them have benefits. So sometimes she's coming, she's just doing artwork and using different materials, but she's really working on things that interest her. This next example is a collage of a cancer patient that I have worked with at the cancer support community. So I do a lot of workshops at various cancer centers. Sometimes they come to just do artwork and be with other individuals who are going through a similar journey. Sometimes they come and they want to examine a different loss that they might be experiencing in life. So this individual had attended several of my workshops, and that day that she was coming to work with me, she had something else that had nothing to do with her cancer heavy on her mind. She was a woman in her late 50s, and she was dating a gentleman who she knew that had lost a daughter before she had met him. And she knew that the anniversary of the death was coming up, and she wanted to recognize it. She didn't really have the words. She didn't have an appropriate card. So she came and said, you know what, I just want to do art about it. And if it's something that turns out that I want to give to him, I think that would be great. So I'm going to walk you through the art project later on, but she received the same directions that I'm going to give you today. And it's a collage that she pulled out images out of the magazine, different textures from the magazine, and words. And they were all things that she knew that was important to him, his family life, his relationship with his daughter, the family dog, the importance of religion in his life. And she gave it to him that evening of the anniversary. They didn't really talk about it, but the next week when she went to his house, it was proudly displayed on the kitchen counter. So she knew that this was something that she could express without having to use words. Often individuals use art as personal expression and healing. And I'll let Erica tell you a little bit about her client's work.
Sure. This client, we did a collage together in an individual therapy session. This is something that I learned from attending Maria's workshop. So through the use of this expressive art, I was able to really connect with this client in ways that hadn't yet been available. So at the Center for Survivors, we deal with some highly traumatized individuals who may have layer upon layer of trauma. And sometimes the trauma is just too difficult to talk about. Other times, there just are no words for what they've been through or seen. At times, you have clients who have experienced things pre-language. So, and the memories are stored so deeply in their subconscious that they're not even aware of them. This client in particular was nearly catatonic when she came to us. It was difficult for her to tell me or to remember how many children she has, and she's a young woman. So we weren't getting very far. We were certainly building rapport, but it was a challenge to help her. Until we tried this. And at this point, I gave the simple instructions that Maria will share with us later in making this collage. And I just let her go to it. And she was able to put this together. I may not be able to see it, but the self-portrait in the middle has very striking eyebrows and one small tear on the face. Now that in and of itself was more expression from this woman than I'd been able to get in over 10 months' time. She also picked words that she didn't know before, but through the use of an interpreter, she was able to find out that these words meant style, and this truly held something to her. So in a past life, she was very concerned with style and image and fashion. But you'll also notice the pull-in of these textures down here, and that spoke to her heritage and her culture. Now, in one short session, I was able to get a real sense of this person, this client that I care about, that I hadn't yet been able to get to know to this degree.
And the other thing that Erica shared with me is that later on, she was able to advocate for more services that was really unusual for her culture to really advocate for herself.
Yeah, so truly a venue for her to feel empowered enough to advocate for herself and really start on her personal journey of healing. So this next image is a piece of artwork that I created, and it shows how you can really change the representation of feelings. So one of the reasons that I work with cancer patients is because I have a son who's a cancer survivor, and he's a healthy teenager now, but he was sick. He got sick when he was 3 and had 130 weeks of chemotherapy. And when he was coming up on his 10-year anniversary of being cancer-free and chemo-free, I felt like I needed to do something different in my life so I wouldn't feel that same anxiety every time I drove by Children's Hospital. So one of the things I did was I began to teach individuals who were going through the cancer experience how to use art. And so when I would drive past Children's Hospital, I knew I was driving past it, beyond it to the adult hospital, and that I was going to get to use art in a real positive way
and it's something that I enjoy, something that I'm good at. So I changed that representation of, I thought of cancer in the hospital, and now I know I could have a different feeling of, and looking forward to what my work was of that day. Also, around that same time, I was given this book called Cancer Ward from an oncologist who thought it would be good vacation reading, and it wasn't good vacation reading. It just caused a little bit of anxiety, so I decided to change that feeling. So I took an X-Acto knife, and I cut it, and I turned it inside out, so it became something healthy, and it became an apple. And so this apple represented really Campbell, my son, because we had planted a bunch of apple trees for one of his birthdays. So that's how I've often used art to change that feeling. This next example is of artwork where groups can come together to express feelings that are beyond words. So after the Boston Marathon bombing, a group of children and their parents were invited to come together to create some artwork. So this was a big banner, about 200 feet long, and there was only a few words on it. It said, "No more hurting people, peace." But the majority of it was swirls of color, and they were able to work with lots of kids and adults worked on it, and they hung this banner over the interstate for the bridge going into Boston. And the parents told the organizers it was a great way for the children to come together and express these feelings that even the parents had no words for. And we saw this recently here in St. Louis where, with the Ferguson crisis, many of the schools were closed during several times, and the students really needed a place that was safe to go to. And so the Ferguson Library opened up, and they had a lot of teachers and artists who came and volunteered. They read to the kids, they provided art projects, so the kids had something to do with their hands, and if they wanted to talk to counselors, they can create artwork and talk at the same time, or they could just create artwork and feel safe. We also saw, at that same time, we saw artists who came together onto South Grand, where a lot of the windows of the storefronts were broken and boarded up. So artists showed up, and they painted the storefronts to show solidarity and support of these small businesses that are so important in their lives. And they painted joyful messages and made it a gallery down the street. So I'm going to walk you through one simple project that you can use. It's a project that Erica learned at the workshop that I presented. It's a workshop that I usually do in a 3-hour setting, and it's very simple. As you saw with Erica's examples, she was able to use it immediately. And it chose materials that anyone can use that most therapists might have in their waiting room or in the office. So magazines, scissors, glue, paper, markers, pencils, and erasers. I invite you to, after this webinar, to try to experience yourself. Walk yourself through the process, gather these materials, spend about 30 minutes, 1 hour on making this collage. The directions are real simple. Find 1 or 2 images, 1 or 2 words, and 1 or 2 textures. If you find 3, that's fine. If you find 1, that's fine. By textures, I mean, like in the background, there's sky and trees. That can be a texture. There's part of rugs in there. That's a texture. This person found a pile of sweaters. That's a texture. So 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 images, 1 or 2 textures. And if you want to, you can rewrite the word. If the word is too small and you want more emphasis, rewrite it. If you want to draw something, if you find a small image of a bird and you want to make it bigger, redraw that. So next, gather those things, cut or rip it out of the magazine, glue it, change it with color, but most importantly, be open to the process and enjoy it. I always like to use this quote when participants are starting this project. The only meaningful work that anyone ever does is work that is done while you don't know exactly what you're doing. So again, be open to the process of the art. If you're an artist, even if you're not an artist, you also have the option to do the advanced version, which is to include a self-portrait or to redraw one of the words or images that you want. And I'm surprised how many people opt to do the self-portrait. Sometimes I'll teach it, sometimes I'll let people just go with it. I know Erica had her client do a self-portrait without having the benefit of a professional artist. So often I have participants who come and they'll have an aha moment, and they'll say, "Oh, this is what I thought this collage was about my relationship with my brothers or relationship with my son," and then, "Oh no, it really wasn't. It's about my relationship with my father." I've had some participants who've gone, "Okay, Maria, I've made this collage. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to use this with my clients." So I always encourage them, if they didn't see the obvious after experience, to be open that maybe on your drive home you'll see something different, or maybe 24 hours from now you'll see something different. I'm going to let Erica talk about how she used it.
Great. This was another example of a collage that was done in an individual therapy session. This client is a very gregarious gentleman. He'd undergone a lot of trauma in his home country of Iraq. As he told me, most of his life, his country had been at war, and the wars got progressively closer to his home in Baghdad. He'd lost family members. He had to leave behind a career that he enjoyed, and homes, and a very, very comfortable lifestyle. He had a son who had been killed in a raid. He had another son who was being held hostage by the police, and there was no contact. And he moved here, and he had to undergo the difficulty of gaining income, finding a home, learning a new language, learning to drive here, trying to study for a citizenship test, to gain some freedom around all of these other things. So many layers of trauma. He was very focused on impressing us with how well he was doing, and yet still he was in a lot of pain. And there was a lot of aggression around his family situation. So I was not getting very far with him in terms of he wasn't very willing at this point to go to the problems. He was very eager to share with me parts of his life that were working, which was great. But I could tell that he was ready to go to the next level. And so we did this project together, and I gave him the very simple instructions that Maria shared. He was able in this session to create this montage. He pulled the two birds that you see from different magazines. They both appealed to him, and he created this tableau. He has the textures and the words and the images. And then we left. And a week later, he came back, and I asked him to share with me what he saw in this picture. And I saw this aha moment happen. He looked at this picture, and he said, "Oh, one of those is me looking up at my wife who wants to leave me, wants a divorce that had been going on for some time and caused him a lot of angst because in his culture that just wasn't done. And that is my wife looking gently into the future. And I see that I need to let her go. I need to let her fly. And I see that these two words are how I want our new relationship to be formed, through love and with honesty." And if you're a practicing clinician, you know those moments are golden. That was insight. That was focused attention on himself and his own personal growth. That wasn't going to happen in so quickly a time period, so quickly a time frame. So for us, that moved our work together eons beyond where we had been. want to talk to you a little bit about how the brain works. And this is information that I like to share with our clients. We share this with as many clients as possible. Well, for several reasons. Because knowledge is power, sure, but also it is important for clients who've been through trauma to know that they can regain certain faculties that they may feel they used to have and they don't anymore. It's very easy to get frustrated when you can't remember something, or you can no longer do a skill, or you just don't feel the same as you know yourself to be pre-trauma. So we share with our clients that the basic anatomy of the brain can be understood in a triune brain framework, okay? The brain develops from the bottom up and from the inside out. And if you can see this slide, you can see that the reptilian brain is what we have in common with reptiles, dinosaurs, all of that. That is, components of the reptilian brain are the spinal cord and the brain stem, okay? Then the next evolutionary phase was the mammalian brain. So the limbic system comes in, the amygdala, that fight or flight or freeze response kicks in. So we have that in common with other mammals. Camels, tigers, cats, dogs, whales. Then the next step in that evolution of the brain is the neomammalian, the human part of the brain. That's that prefrontal cortex, the covering, the shell that protects that limbic system. But it also helps us engage in executive functions, analyzing data, weighing options, making good rational decisions that are good for our benefit. As opposed to just reacting, it's where you can think clearly and evaluate a situation. Well, when we are scared, that prefrontal cortex goes offline, and we're just operating from that mammalian brain, the amygdala kicking in, and we are using our animal instincts, if you will, and we call that survival brain. So many of our clients who have been through intense trauma are in that mode. And until you do certain things to regain pre-trauma brain status, you're still in survival mode. So we teach clients about this so that they can understand there's hope, things can get better, but this is what's going on. And they're operating from that mammalian brain, and we need to pull the prefrontal cortex back online. And there are ways to do this. Parts of the brain that I just want to share a small definition with you of that I think are helpful are the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus. Okay, and this is essentially what we share with our trauma clients. So the amygdala is the fear center. It's the emotional center of the brain. This is what kicks in when we experience a traumatic incident. It's when a door slams, or when there's an accident of some kind, or an impeding threat. Again, this part of the brain was used quite often when we lived in caves and had threats of large mammals coming at us often. It was not meant to be sustained for long periods of time, living in that survival brain mode. Okay? So the amygdala, when this fear occurs, the fight or flight or freeze mechanism kicks in, and the amygdala gains size. The prefrontal cortex at that point gets shut down because it's non-essential. Okay? The amygdala grows, the prefrontal cortex shuts down, the parasympathetic nervous system shuts down. We don't need things like digestion and blood flow to our extremities, but we do need increased heart rate, increased blood flow to the torso, everything that you might need in order to fight or flee or freeze. Tightening of muscles, all of that. The prefrontal cortex, if it's offline, can't discern important information and then send it on to the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where information is stored and then recalled later. So in the instance of a trauma patient, you have the amygdala enlarged, the prefrontal cortex not operational right now, and the hippocampus sort of hibernating. So as you can imagine, coming to a new country and trying to learn a new language, or being asked to learn items of citizenship for a test is incredibly distressing, because those functions of the brain just aren't available right now. And so through this process of expressive arts, in particular, we can help people get out of survival brain mode and get back to a functional brain mode. So we talked a little bit about how trauma affects the brain physiologically. There also are these emotional impacts, okay? We have the fight or flight mechanism activated. All systems are go in terms of the blood flow to the torso, muscles tightening. All of that creates anxiety. It's difficult to sleep when your muscles are tight. It's difficult to sleep when you have racing thoughts and dry mouth and cold hands. All of that affects a person's mental state. So Hebe's principle, neurons that fire together, wire together, is used in great detail in this explanation, because what we're trying to do in trauma recovery work, trauma processing, is to heal from trauma by opening new neural networks. And the way to do that is to engage the prefrontal cortex in activities and bring that back online. And by creating those new neural networks between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, we're telling the amygdala it's okay to calm down, you can reduce in size. The prefrontal cortex can, again, gain access to the dopamine receptors, which calm, those are the pleasure sensations. Cortisol levels go down, oxytocin kicks in, that's that relaxing hormone. So that is really the key to healing from trauma, is that brain work. There's been a recent revolution in neuroscience, and much of what we know about the brain now, over 90% of what we know now, is learned within the last 20 years. The neuro revolution in what we understand about the brain has primarily to do with regeneration and regrowth. Neuroplasticity is the availability of the brain to change and to adapt and to be flexible, to change over time, much more like plastic than a cement. So we've discovered a huge capacity for regeneration and regrowth in people well into their 70s and 80s. And that 10, 15 years ago was not thought to be possible. So what we're doing with that new information is allowing therapy to help us access new pathways. So we're creating new neural networks through use of the expressive arts in particular, to engage the prefrontal cortex and those executive functions, which, again, reduce the size of the amygdala, tell the fight or flight mechanism to calm down and go offline so that normal activity can resume. And we're finding that the expressive arts offer those repetitive, patterned neural transmissions which make that possible. Again, art can alter the brain in a positive manner in several ways, and we've just talked a little bit about some of those. Again, we have the neurons firing and rewiring together. So it's like building muscle at the gym. If you are constantly doing this, those muscle fibers will gain in strength, and soon you'll have something that wasn't there before. So if you are telling your brain to switch gears on purpose to create a new neural network, eventually those synapses will form, and that new neural network will become the norm. So again, all of that functions to calm the amygdala, have that reduce in size, bring the hippocampus back up to normal size. The prefrontal cortex is allowed more blood flow, and again, the dopamine receptors open up to the pleasure sensations that we can enjoy when talking to a friend or going out to lunch or crossing the street, that type of thing. So the pathways are reopened up to executive functioning. We talked a little bit about the visual arts and expressive arts, but I wanted to mention what we discovered about music. So music and drumming are another way to tap into those new neural networks through expressive arts. And when neurons are firing within the brain, then the transmission is going from neuron to neuron and axon to axon. We have those synapses talking to each other. And the speed with which that is happening in the brain is a wavelength. These are the waveforms of the brain, and there are several different ones, 5 now, that I'll share with you. We've found that music can help the brain access these on purpose. So again, we're talking about empowering our clients, whomever we're working with, through the expressive arts. And if you can get someone to a brain state where they can sleep better, attend to information and learn better, or just be relaxed, or go about their normal day, then that contributes to increased emotional well-being. So gamma waves are a hyperbrain activity, which is great for learning. So that is, it's not hyper, but it's excited brain wave. And the more brain waves that are happening, the better memory retention. Beta waves are where we normally spend our day. We're busy going to the store, talking to friends, whatever. Normally, we are in the beta wave state. Alpha waves are what happens when the person is very relaxed. This is maybe what you might have in someone who's getting a massage or being sung a lullaby, that type of thing. Theta waves, you're drowsy, you're drifting down into sleep and dreams. This is tough to achieve without, a great deal of tiredness or perhaps the love of a mother figure. Monks are very good. Tibetan monks are famous for their ability to get to a state of theta quickly, rapidly, and stay there and sustain themselves. And when electrical activity is measured, you can see the brain going from a gamma or beta to a theta very quickly. Delta waves, so that's, again, deep asleep, not dreaming, no REM, just asleep. So when you can get someone to a state on purpose, they begin to see how this works. And so we've used music in therapy to achieve these states. And different frequencies will help achieve these different states. There's lots of information online about how to do that. But I wanted to share with you how music, too, is a form of expressive art.
And if you came to one of our live workshops, and when we do the hands-on art projects, we will include music to work to and to get you to the alpha wave state.
Oh. So now we're happy to take some questions.
And we'll throw open the floor for questions as well. If anybody wants to submit questions, use the chat box alongside the video window. Type in your question and click the blue Say button next to it. You may have to give yourself a nickname the first time you use it, but you should not have to log in. A couple of questions that have come in. Also, if there's any questions in the room, please let us know. Just on the last comment on music, it occurs to me that movie producers have known that for years. What you said about in bringing people along to different states. Just haven't measured it so much. But is this kind of an offshoot of that type of work?
Well, I think use of expressive arts has been around since the beginning of time. We all know the scary music from movies, or as you just mentioned, movie producers using big melodramatic music for an exciting crescendo of some movie. But also, if you think about the use of drawings in caves. These were expressing some kind of emotion that was used for healing. And people have been using the arts to relax themselves, to increase relatability amongst each other in community since the dawning of time. And I think the research we're doing in the brain is just sort of solidifying what we've already known at an instinctual level, that the arts make us feel better.
All right, I think you covered this a little bit in your earlier presentation, but can you do the expressive art in a group therapy setting?
You want to talk about that?
Well, I've often used that both at cancer centers and at the Center of Survivors of Trauma. I've also used it with business people. I made the step from working in a project called CocoBiz through the Center of Contemporary Arts, where we teach individuals to think more creatively, work more cooperatively using the arts. So I brought the Altered Book project to a group of business people, and I was teaching them how to focus on what's important and to ignore the extra stuff so they could take a persistent challenge and work through it more creatively. And not only were they able to see things that were important in their work and how they can move forward, but then they started to have some of the participants had this aha moment. They had nothing to do with their business day. They had they were able to work through something that's happening in their family. And I was surprised that in the setting of a workshop for business people, that they were able to share what they discovered. So often in different groups like that, there's the benefit of being around other people and being able to process. When we do the live workshops for mental health professionals, there's that benefit of talking through your project in small groups, and then being able to say to the larger group, this is what I experienced. And being able to be validated, to be able to show your artwork and be validated and having your voice heard is very powerful.
I want to say, even for those who might not be comfortable sharing, I think there's value in being in a group setting, even if you're not the one sharing or showing your work. That's pretty daunting for some people, particularly if they're not comfortable in the arts. So those aha moments that we talked about, those are really available as someone else shares. You might see yourself in that person's journey and have an insight for yourself. Additionally, you might also just have comfort that someone else is walking the same path, even if you didn't know them before the project.
You've struck a nerve out here. The questions are coming, some really good questions coming in here. Let's combine a couple of them. The question comes in as if you recommend a particular kind of magazine for use in the project, but at the same time, they'd like you to review the instructions for that collage project. I don't know if you want to put the slide back up for that or not.
Sure. You want to do the instructions?
Okay. So the materials you need are magazines, markers, pencils, erasers, glue, and scissors. And then you find 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 images, 1 or 2 textures. If it's only 1, that's fine. If it's 3 or 5, that's fine. Textures meaning a pile of sweaters or some twigs, or since when I give this workshop at COCA, when I have access to more art materials, I might provide beautiful rice papers or textures from a wallpaper sample book. But you, as therapist, if you're looking to provide something that's really easy, use what other magazines are in your waiting room. I like to collect beautiful magazines for my workshop, and people give them to me now that they know I have these workshops, like Veranda, Architectural Digest. But I also like to provide things like, a dance magazine, or a magazine that might have lots of animals, or a gardening magazine. They're real random things, but if you provide several, it's going to speak to people. And I really encourage individuals who are going to do this to not even think about it. Flip through some magazines, flip through some images, pull what pops out and what really strikes you.
I will add to that, having worked with several cultures and people of different religious persuasions, that it is important that you have a mixture of magazines. In Style and GQ are not going to be appropriate for the highly devout Muslim. So again, you've touched on this, a wide variety, something that doesn't have people in it or is focused on animals. National Geographic can be a good one. I like the calendars. Calendars are botanical garden catalog, something that's focused on something in nature.
I've also provided piano books, old piano books, because I'm surprised by how many people go, oh my gosh, those lyrics really speak to me. Or, oh, I remember, that evokes this strong emotion from my childhood, and pull out those words.
Like the score?
Yes, yes.
So we've had 2 requests to elaborate a little bit on dance therapy.
Sure.
3.
Oh, great. Nice. Sure. I've taught dance before, and it's my passion, and it's what I love, and it's probably how my self-expression comes out. So I am very interested in how to use dance as a vehicle for self-expression and for healing. So in terms of a typical therapy session, you know, that's going to depend on where you are and the person with whom you're working. So that can be very subjective and very individualized. But I do think particularly with, again, we've danced with our Bosnian women. That group that did the art had a component on nutrition, where we taught them about physical health and the importance of eating well, balanced meals, etc., and then moved into a component on movement, where we invited them to bring their cultural dances in to teach others. So we had a couple guest instructors come in, we had yoga instructor come in, we had a Zumba instructor come in, and then we invited the women. So we had Afghani, Bosnian, Iraqi women doing Zumba together with a South American instructor. It was fabulous, and 4 interpreters. At a certain level, you don't need interpretation anymore. But then we also ask them to share with each other. And I think in that context, it's amazing. It's amazing to see someone overcome by pain and anguish of their daily life, completely lose themselves in the music that speaks to their past and in movement that they know innately. The muscle memory is absolutely there. And maybe that was the same person that was sitting with a frozen shoulder or a bum knee, and all of a sudden they're moving like a child.
I do want to add, when people ask questions about dance therapy, again, dance therapy, like art therapy, is a master's program that you learn. So we're talking about dance that's used expressively. And
so we're not, this is separate from, historical elements of dance, and this is using dance as an expression of the self. It's not necessarily teaching about the elements of dance and history and even the physiological components. Again, you want to be careful because there is art therapy, there is dance therapy, and this is separate from that.
This is expressive art. But I do have to say one more thing about dance. One of the most therapeutic dance classes I've taken is called NIA, and it's a great mind-body experience where that they combine a lot of different types of dance and some Tai Chi and some meditation type things and some yoga type things, and you sweat, you express yourself. There's a lot of empowerment. So there's a lot of different types that people use that are therapeutic, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that.
And I just had a comment. I have a nephew, and he plays drums.
Yeah.
He has a whole set of drums. And
Yeah.
anytime he gets frustrated or depressed,
Yeah.
he goes and he plays those drums, and you would be surprised as to the pieces he comes up with
Wow.
just from expressing himself through the drums music.
Thank you for that comment.
Yeah, and I'm sure he feels better after he's done. Yeah. So that's what we want to encourage people by exposing them to these things that could be relatively attainable to just about anyone, that they can take their own stress down and create those new neural networks that help in the healing process, particularly after trauma.
Is it difficult to engage clients in art therapy or expressive art who do not think of themselves as being artistic?
That's why I choose the project of using magazines. They don't have to be able to draw. They just have to be able to rip or cut and be able to see.
And when you assure them there is no judgment, again, you need that therapeutic alliance and you need that rapport. I wouldn't walk into a room with people that I didn't know and have very good success personally. But if they already trusted me and I've shared with them that this is a personal journey, this only matters for you. If you like it, great. If it reflects something you're experiencing, then we've hit the mark.
I've also, there was one time I gave this workshop for a graduate class in education, and I had a couple people who asked the teacher ahead of time, can I come to this? I don't have any drawing experience. And I assured the teacher, please tell them to come. I'm not going to make them draw unless they want to draw. And afterwards, I did say, now, You can stand up and show it, or you don't have to. You can talk about it, but don't feel like you have to talk about it. Almost every single person stood up and said, I'm not going to talk about it, and then they continued to talk about it.
And I do want to add that the women's group, I think the 14 women there, one had had a class when she was a child in school. No specialty, nothing like that. And so every one of them had something in the exhibit, many of them multiple pieces, 6 or 7 pieces of art in the final exhibit. People that weren't going to do this, weren't going to show their work, and didn't identify themselves as artists to start with.
Can expressive art therapy be beneficial for someone with autism?
Absolutely.
Perfect question. We love that question.
That's another workshop that Eric and I co-present. I have 3 children. All of them have been diagnosed with Asperger's, and they're all healthy teenage boys. And they have used the arts in their own journey through life to deal with some of their struggles. So same thing that's happening with the brain when you use the arts with trauma individuals. Same thing for atypical learners. You're making those synapses go, and you're rewiring the brain. Someone with ADHD who can use dance or drumming or art to calm themselves. I have one private student who came to me to just do artwork, to learn how to draw better and paint better. But then I discovered that he also had some learning disabilities. And so I suggested to the mom, I was like, you know what? I've done this with another art student, that after they do art with me, they sit and do their homework because their brain is calmed and they're focused. And I had the mom come early one day to watch this happen. He did his art for an hour. He sat down and did his homework for 15 minutes, finished it, was very thoughtful, and mom said, wow, at home, that would have taken an hour to get him to do it. So with someone with ADHD, it's great to use art. Atypical learners, those who are on the autism spectrum, I get a lot of those kiddos when I teach at COCA and both in my private studio. And part of it is because those art students are coming to the arts because they don't fit into the typical sports teams. And some of them come to me and they do have some art talent. Some of them come to me and they have very poor fine motor skills. But I can teach them how to be successful. I can teach them how to have their voice heard. I can teach them how to be with other group of kids who may be typical learners, who may be atypical learners. So thank you for that question.
There's actually physiological evidence that, the grandmother who had the kids go run around in the backyard before they could focus was right on. Yeah.
They're often smarter than we think.
Exactly. Exactly.
Erica, as a counselor, as a therapist, what ways can you process expressive art projects with your clients?
I would suppose in a myriad ways. The bird collage in particular, we had to let that sit for a bit. And then when I showed that collage to the client again, he saw something that hadn't been obvious to him, it hadn't been available to him before the project, and it certainly wasn't obvious until some time had passed and he had time to sit with it. So certainly in individual sessions, asking them to reflect on it and just share what comes up. I have a couple of clients who I gave a sketchbook to, and they don't have to show me anything. I just ask that they do something once a week, and it doesn't matter what. And really, that's a self-guided exploration of what's in their head. So what I'm trying to do is encourage people to find a venue that answers that need of trauma processing getting itself out. So that's the individual, perhaps in session, perhaps in an exhibit like this with a group, perhaps sharing with family. Those are the primary ways of processing expressive arts.
All right, well, as we segue to the end of the program, Maria read my mind here. first, a shameless plug for the next thing that you guys are going to be doing. And why
yeah.
don't we segue from there right into
Thank
your
you.
closing comments, and then I'll wrap it up.
Great.
So if you've enjoyed today's webinar, we are doing this live, a 3-hour version next week through COCA, and you will get to learn not only the collage experience, where we have some real specific small group prompts, but you also get to learn the Altered Book project, which is a very rich project to participate in. And you can sign. Last time I checked, there was still space available, so you can access that either through cocastl.org or through my website that is listed on the today's page.
And additionally, in speaking of autism, we are working together, collaborating to create a support group for siblings, a self-empowerment group for girls, siblings of kids on the spectrum.
And you can, future opportunities are always coming up. So check my website. I try to update it as often as possible. So thank you again for participating in today's webinar. I'm going to end with one story. As a teacher, I like to tell stories. So this is an image of 2 kids. I'm going to call the boy on the left C and the girl on the right M. C is a classmate in his school named M, whose mother passed away last year. M was upset in class when they were working on a Mother's Day project, and C asked her why she was sad. M told him what was going on, and he told her that whenever he is upset about things, he paints his way through his emotions. He said he would love to teach her to paint, and maybe she could even make a special painting about her mom. She loved this idea, and the 2 of them asked the classroom teacher, who was very supportive of the idea. The teacher thought that C and M would paint during the 1 hour that she had allotted for their Mother's Day project, and that would be it. C had another idea. He brought in his iPad to do research with M. They looked at lots of images and finally narrowed their search to the perfect idea. That was the first morning of the work. When the teacher saw how engaged and verbal M was after that period, she gave them the space to keep exploring their project. C worked with M on really looking at the image she selected for all the details. They then worked on sketching and then sketching on canvas. Over the weekend, he printed the image that she loved on multiple prints with different tones on his home printer so he could really look at color with her and make more choices. He showed her how to mix paint, hold a paintbrush, and paint it with her. The teacher said that was the most energized and enthusiastic she had seen M in a long time. Tomorrow, when thinking about using art, I invite you to approach it with the spirit of C's heart and the teacher's openness. Thank you.
All right, and folks, thank you very, very much for joining us this afternoon. I can't imagine you could have gotten a more valuable presentation today. Appreciate so many of you staying with us and folks that joined us in the room today. We will be looking for other opportunities to work with these 2 again. We've already started exploring some options with them, so we hope to have them as part of our MIMH collaborative for a while as well. If you're interested in purchasing CEUs, we'll leave that link open. We'll send that to you as well. We'll send a link out to Maria's website as well as to the COCA website so you can explore those other programming opportunities. But as always, we look forward to the next time that you're able to join us. And if you're in the St. Louis area, in the Missouri area, and are interested in other programming activities that we may do live, keep tuned to mimhtraining.com. The big one coming up at the end of May is the Missouri Department of Mental Health Spring Training Institute. Big program May 28th and 29th down at Tantera. It's always possible to see some familiar faces there as well. So again, folks, thank you for joining us today. Erica, Maria, thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you, Tom.